Kenneth, Mr. S. Iswaran says that the Reform Party's proposals are ad hoc. What is your response?
Well, of course they're not ad hoc. They're actually been around since 2009. We refined them and put out similar proposals in our 2011 election manifesto, and we've now brought it up to date for 2015. What is ad hoc is the way the PAP year after year produce packages with goodies or ad hoc payments to the citizens with no real long-term thought or planning behind it.
And he says returning CPF at 55 will jeopardize a sound system. What is your defense?
Well, you know, really, I am quite disturbed, worried by his use of the term jeopardize. How can, if the CPF is solvent and GIC has invested wisely according to a maturity structure of CPF, how can it jeopardize a sound system to return people's CPF at 55? If you were a private pension fund provider, you would have to deal with expected redemptions at 55. Why can't the government? It actually begs serious questions about the solvency of GIC and potentially Temasek and the safety of our CPF system.
So how will you finance this proposal and how much will it cost?
Well, we laid out the way we will finance it at our election rally speech. Basically, the cost has been calculated the cost to be around $6 billion, comprised of $2.5 billion for the basic old age pension of $500 a month, $3 billion for child benefit to be paid to mothers for every child under the age of 18, and abolishing MediShield life premiums for the over 65s and under 18s. Of course, that is not going to be the final cost. The final cost will actually be considerably lower because, as every economist knows, what the government spends will come back to it partially in the form of higher tax receipts. Additional spending of in the region of $5 to $6 billion after we take into account the tax coming back to the government from additional spending, and this is well within the net investment returns contributions, which are not currently being used for current expenditure. So there's absolutely no problem with financing it. We don't have to raise taxes, nor do we have to borrow from future generations. What we are doing is invest through these payments, investing in our people very sensibly. Mr. Iswaran called our proposal seductive. Our increase in child benefit, if it gets Singaporeans reproducing more and a rise in the fertility rate, that will be great and will pay for itself in terms of future taxpayers down the road.
Mr. Patrick Tay said a minimum wage will quickly become a maximum. What is your response?
Well, I find that quite an absurd argument because a minimum is what it said, a minimum wage, and it's designed to protect Singaporeans to some extent, protect the less well-off or less well-educated Singaporeans from being undercut by cheaper foreign labour. Remember, most of the foreign workers coming to Singapore come from countries with wage levels only a fraction of Singapore's. So that's designed for their protection, but obviously in order to get higher quality labor or labor in more demand, employers are going to have to pay well above the minimum. We don't intend to set the minimum, at least to start with, at a level which would damage the businesses of our SMEs. We will start off at a fairly low level and then look to raise it in line with productivity growth and the cost of living over time.
Okay, so Mr. Lim Hung Kiang said the cap on foreign workers will curtail Singapore's economic growth. So what do you say to that?
Well, it's interesting. I think that goes back to the nub of our argument that the PAP are just using foreign workers to generate economic growth. Now, I think Sam Britton, a UK economic commentator, said that that would be an absurd to generate economic growth through just increasing the population is a ludicrous way to grow our economy. Reform Party wants to see a cap on foreign workers so as to protect our domestic workforce, and ensure that most of our growth comes about through higher productivity rather than just adding more workers. What we have said is that we will fine-tune it so that if wages, for instance, real wages, after adjusting for prices, were rising faster than productivity growth, then we could allow in more foreign workers so as to keep our economy competitive. Likewise, if real wages were lagging behind productivity, then, or even failing to keep up with inflation, that would be a signal that we should tighten the cap on foreign labor.
And finally, PAP says reducing NS to 1 year will be unworkable because of manpower constraints, and having a professional army will also reduce our manpower pool. So how do you respond to that?
Well, I think that goes to the nub again, in microcosm of what the PAP's problem is, but they cannot raise the productivity of the Singapore economy, and they have failed to do so over the last 25 to 30 years. We lag badly behind in productivity other advanced nations. What we are proposing by reducing the period of national service is that the armed forces will have to use labour more productively. We may even think about drawing women into national service in one form or another, perhaps expanding the range of activities counted as national service. And we may even think of making national service a route to citizenship in the country, or serving in the regular army for a period of at least 5 years. So we don't anticipate it being a major manpower constraint. Let's remember that including national servicemen, I think Singapore has a total armed force of in the region of 250,000 men. America manages to act as a global policeman with an army now only of about 400,000. So I think it's absurd to talk about reducing NS being a major constraint on our ability to defend ourselves.